Thank you very much for coming. My name is Dr. Walter Supplachny. I served as the command historian of the 28th Division before I retired in 2009. Since then, I've been working on the Battle of the Bulge research and went over to Luxembourg a few times, sat in some foxholes, and did some of that to better understand what the 28th Division did during the Battle of the Bulge. We are happy to have here today with us retired Colonel Tom Vossler. He was the Chief of Staff for the U.S. First Army, Military History Institute Director at the War College here. He was a teaching faculty at the War College, and currently is involved with the Eisenhower Society. And please be sure you check their exhibit out over in the building. So Colonel Vossler is going to set the stage for us in Europe in 1944, and then I'll pick it up and talk about what the 28th Infantry Division did then during the Battle of the Bulge. All right, Colonel Vossler.
All right. Well, it's good to see y'all here. Not the least of which is we're in the shade. So just sit down and relax. And so we have a story to tell. And the story we're going to tell is the 28th Division in the Battle of the Bulge. Before we get there, we need to describe how the 28th got to a position to be involved in a battle in Belgium and Luxembourg, which will be named in history, popular history, as the Battle of the Bulge. So the beginning of the story actually goes back to June 6, 1944, with the Allied landings on the beaches at Normandy. And once the landings take place, the Allied forces come ashore. The American, the British, and the Canadian forces are ashore. It is going to take 7 weeks. 7 weeks in France before they can break out in the interior of France and cause the Germans to withdraw. For 7 weeks, the Germans are going to contain the Allied landings. Allied landings, we have two famous personalities, Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery, the 21st Army Group, to the left. To the right is American General Omar Bradley and his forces are going to be trying to break through repeatedly, making attacks against the German perimeter defense that's going to hold the lodgment against the beaches. Finally, at the end of July of 1944, General Bradley's forces will break through. During the last week of July, they'll break through at a place called Saint-Lô. Once they break through there, the Germans will then reorient their force to stop the penetration created by General Bradley's forces, which weakens the German defending forces that are in front of the British over at Caen. This will allow then the British to break through. So with the British breakthrough, the American breakthrough, then we have a chase into the interior of France. We have major battles where the German army is surrounded and basically annihilated at battles like at Mortain. All this on the way to Paris. So for 7 weeks after the landings, the Germans contain the Allied landing. Then once they break out, another 4 weeks is going to be spent by the American forces driving to the east, 186 miles to the east in 4 weeks to Paris and the River Seine. The Germans withdraw to the far bank of the River Seine as a defensive line. The Allies pause in their movement for the logistics to catch up. It took, again, 4 weeks to advance from the breakout to Paris and the River Seine. Now, once the Allies restart their attack, the Germans again do a fighting withdrawal, and it only takes 2 weeks for the Allies to get all the way to the eastern part of France, Belgium, and Luxembourg in the area of the Ardennes Forest. what we call the Siegfried Line, or the West Wall. There's numerous battles along the West Wall, particularly in the Hürtgen Forest that you're going to hear about. And those battles will precede the battle at Normandy. But on the 16th of December, and by this time, the High Command of the Allied High Command feels that the Germans have been finished. They've witnessed the destruction of the German soldiers and the vehicles and the battles during the breakout and the pursuit. And the thinking of the chain of command is that the Germans certainly cannot sustain the war effort much longer, and they're about to surrender. In fact, there's a bet between General Eisenhower and Field Marshal Montgomery of $50 that the war would be over by Thanksgiving. And Montgomery thought that it would. Eisenhower is doubtful. So Eisenhower's going to win that $50 bet. But surprise attack by the Germans on the 16th of December in the area of the Ardennes Forest. This is not unfamiliar ground to the Germans. They had attacked through here in May of 1940 for their invasion of France. And so here they come again. Large armored formations of Army Group B under Field Marshal Walter Model will conduct the attack. 6th Panzer Army to the north, commanded by German General Sepp Dietrich, with 4 armored divisions and 4 infantry divisions. To the south, the 5th Panzer Army, commanded by General Hasso von Manteuffel, will conduct their attack against the Allied lines, a surprise attack. Strategically, the German objective is to get to the port of Antwerp, which recently opened, and destroy the ability to logistically supply the Allied armies for a further advance across the Rhine River into Germany. And so that is the German plan strategically. Drive a wedge between the British and Canadian forces to the north, the American forces to the south, and reach and hold and destroy the Allied forces at Antwerp. There'll be a lot of units participating in the battle. In popular history, we hear of the 101st Airborne Division, but there are many, many others. One of the many, many others we're going to hear about right now is the 28th Infantry Division, whose origins are right here in Pennsylvania. Sergeant Major, back to you.
Thank you, sir. We here at the 20th Division Association felt it was important to come here and talk a little bit about what the 28th Infantry Division did 80 years ago, December 16th, 1944, and a couple of days after that. As the Colonel mentioned, popular history, Hollywood, and so on has made pretty strong stories about what the 101st Airborne did and other units, the Band of Brothers, and so on. And certainly not taking anything away from the sacrifices those soldiers made. They were tremendous. But there's more to the story. And oftentimes historians write books and articles and they kind of bypass the rest of the story. So we're here today to talk a little bit about the rest of that story as it pertains to the 28th Division. The 28th Infantry Division is the oldest division-sized unit in the Army. Some of the units of the division can trace their lineage back to Ben Franklin's Associators, 1774 to 1777. Pretty old unit. In 1879, it was formed officially as a division, and in 1917, prior to their entrance into World War I, division was designated as the Keystone Division, Keystone Red, Keystone Patch. Before we look at the division at the Battle of the Bulge, the colonels touched on some of it, but we're going to take a look at what they did as they went across Europe. Pages are damp. The division trained in England, landed in Normandy, France on July 22nd, 1944. They participated in the breakout in Saint-Lô, Colonel talked about. They marched in the Paris Liberation Parade, and they liberated sections of Belgium, Luxembourg, and moved into Germany in early September, attacking this famous Siegfried Line, the West Wall. On September 29th, the division received orders to move to Aachen, Germany, in preparation for a planned First Army attack to seize the Ruhr River dams on the way to Cologne, Germany, and into the heart of Germany itself. While fighting in Normandy was intense, nothing prepared these men for what they found in the Hürtgen forest. The Germans had constructed pillboxes, interlocking fire, hidden machine guns, nests, minefields, and their artillery was adjusted so it would burst above the trees, not only producing the shrapnel from the artillery rounds, but splinters from the trees would rain down on the soldiers. They had to cover their foxholes with big logs to provide them some protection. Morale suffered, obviously. The 9th Division, who they went in after, was badly beaten up. The 28th Division suffered over 6,100 casualties. And were not successful in capturing Schmidt, and some of the other places, at least not successful in holding them. So they had to rest, their losses had to be replaced, and they were sent to the west bank of the Our River in Luxembourg that, as the Colonel mentioned, the Allies thought was a rest area. The war was over. The Germans were beat. The American soldiers were going to be home by Christmas. You know? Who would want to make an attack through this heavily forested region of Germany in Luxembourg? Only a few major roads. So there, the 28th Division was sent. They felt it was such a rest area, they gave them a 25-mile front to guard. The standard front of the division at that time was 6 miles. So over 4 times the front of a standard division is what the 28th Division had to man. Now, knowing that they could not continuously defend an entire 25-mile front, the commanders decided to set up what they called strong points at critical road junctions, church steeples, those types of places, thinking that if the Germans came, they're going to come over improved roads, and they're going to have to pass these kinds of places. They were arrayed with the 112th Infantry Regiment in the north, the 110th Infantry Regiment in the south, and the 109th Infantry Regiment, or 110th in the center, and the 109th Infantry Regiment in the south. While the men rested and refitted, Hitler had different ideas for them. He thought that by committing his last military reserves, he could drive through Luxembourg and Belgium onto the port of Antwerp, which, by the way, was the only deep water port along the coast at the time. The harbors, the temporary harbors that they built after the Normandy landings, were okay for a limited amount of transfer of material onto the coast, but there were no way comparing what it was like to have a deep water port designed for cargo vessels and all that crane capability and all that kind of stuff as they had in Antwerp. So, against his general's better judgment, he ordered that advance, which they called the Ardennes counteroffensive. We called the Battle of the Bulge. At a little after 5 o'clock in the morning on December 16th, the thoughts of Christmas and coming home early evaporated as German artillery rained down across that entire 25-mile front. Initially, the Allies thought it was, well, just the Germans are firing artillery, right? They weren't too excited about it. And it took a little while for them to realize that this was a major effort. The Germans knew that they had to secure the limited road network through the forest if they're going to go on to Antwerp, to take their tanks to Antwerp. Sure, they could take their tanks across the fields, but now at this time it's muddy, there's snow on the ground, Things were wet. Tanks don't go real well in deep mud, but they go real well on paved roads. So they had to capture these roads. The Americans knew that by setting up strong points on these roads, they could hopefully delay some of the German advance to Bastogne, other places, and on to Antwerp. Why Bastogne? Bastogne was a critical road network, major roads that went through it, that they were able to take, they would have been able to take their armor across quickly to Antwerp. Success or failure of the entire operation, according to the commander of the 26th Volksgrenadier Division, who the 110th faced, was dependent upon the stubborn drive westward and achieving Bastogne on the second day. By the 17th, by the evening of the 17th, the German plan was to already encircle or capture Bastogne. Okay? So they figured if they did that by the 17th, we wouldn't have given the Allies enough time to reinforce it. During the day, the Germans attacked with tanks, infantry, and breached supporting positions, including kitchen areas of the 28th Division units. Positions were held, and the Germans were repulsed by. When I looked at a lot of the interviews of soldiers who fought during that time, one thing came across very clear. They said, I'll paraphrase, enough is enough, we're not letting them win. We fought so long and so hard, we are not going to let it happen. So we're going to do whatever it takes to stop the Germans. Frank Olson from Company A, 1st Battalion, remembered thinking, oh no, you're not going through here. We carried out our order, and they told us, stay to the end, and we did that. Many of the soldiers fought to the last ammunition, fought to the last man. Many of them fought until everything was gone, and they had to surrender. There's nothing they could do, you know. The 109th, after initial barrage, strong German infiltrations were reported along the 2nd and 3rd Battalions front. Strong German attacks followed, but in many cases were repulsed. First Lieutenant Mo Katz won the Bronze Star for heroism. He stopped a large German column of regimental strength moving along the road. He radioed information back, and they did a joint artillery coordinated effort, and they attacked the Germans, killing about 2,000 people. There was a road, I wish we could show you on the map, but on the PowerPoint screen, but on your map it will show you there's a road called, the road from St. Vith down to Dykirch, a little bit west of the Ore River, that the soldiers called Skyline Drive because it resembled the Skyline Drive in Virginia, okay? The Germans knew they had to capture that in order to continue on the paved roads. And many of the strong points that the Americans had set up were along that Skyline Drive. Cedric W. Foster was one of the top news analysts for Mutual Broadcasting System during the war. Speaking from studios in WNAC Boston on January 19, 1945, he broadcast the following. I'm going to read it to you. Quote, Worley Cassidy of the North American Newspaper Alliance, who is credited to the United States 28th Infantry Division, has told today for the first time the story of the 28th Division's heroic stand in the German breakthrough of last December. He said that it is the merest justice to declare that the Keystone 28th Division, under command of Major General Norman D. Cota, deserves equal credit with the gallant 101st Airborne for stemming the German drive, and so on. The Germans struck in Clairvaux, which the 110th, which is in the center, probably had the largest front to defend. They held paper-thin lines until it was just too much. The German advance, the armor, the infantry coming, just overwhelmed them. But the point is that they held the Germans long enough for the Allies to realize what was going on and to move the 101st and other units into Bastogne and around Bastogne. The Germans arrived 4 hours after 101st Airborne was in there. Okay? So they wanted to capture Bastogne long before the 101st would have been there. They would have blown right through it. And there's a debate to this day where the logistics would have held up, and they could have actually gone on to Antwerp. But let's say they could have resupplied and gone on. It might have been a different course in the war at that time. The war wasn't going to change. The war was still going to be won by the Allies. But what the 28th Division soldiers did, heroically, fighting to the last man in many cases, saved a lot of lives. And it bought the Allies time. From the inception of the battle, for us, it took its toll on the opposing German forces. It embodied unwavering commitment to principles, the unshakable faith in their mission, and the valor that comes with putting oneself in harm's way for the greater good. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of the 28th Division in the Battle of the Bulge. Thank you.